Here we go, another video. And this is a follow-up video to the video I made about debt betas. I tried to demonstrate how you could really find information on debt betas from credit spreads, how easy it was to compute down here, how this has a dramatic effect on the re-leverage and unleveraging of the kind of to find the equity cost of capital, and we could do it without taxes. Now, what this video is going to be about, it's going to be just some of the mechanical details. So if you don't want the mechanical details, if you got the idea, don't give a crap about the Excel, it's a good time to stop. I'm going to show you how to use the interpolate command. I'm going to show you a few other things. Okay, so remember, this is the data we got from the interest rate. I have a file, and I'm repeating it so much it's kind of absurd. This is the generic macros file. If I press implement, and then if I press shift control C, if you have any problems with this file, please give it to me. Then the next thing we had is some of these credit rating standards. Now, I found an old kind of table. And this table showed the debt to capital ratio, how it varied, and what the requirement for an A-rated debt to capital was, and a double B rated debt to capital, and it gave a range starting with a high and a low. So there was no such thing as a triple A, but we do know that the high point of an A was 48. So if it's less than 48, it's kind of a triple A. And if you have a very safe business profile, if you have a moderate business profile, you have to have less than 35% to be an A. And then we go down to what it requires to be a double A, and really these two numbers should be the same. Of course, they're not always the same, but so I picked the wrong one. Now, just another mechanical issue. This conditional formatting is really quite easy, where you looking at this number and comparing it to this number. This number is fixed. This number is always in column J. So if we go to conditional formatting, and we go to manage the rules, and we go to edit the rules, you can see that the rule is that the J, without the row being fixed, and starting at the very first row, that's the trick, is equal to the fixed one here. And then we just formatted it. Okay, and then the area of the formatting is this thing. I hope I didn't show you this before, whatever. Okay? So if we change this to 7, we need a 30% to be, this is a very risky one. If we're less than 30, this one we're less than 48, we're still AAA. This one we're less than 30%, we're AAA. And then if we have 60% up here, we would still be rated kind of just the edge of the high. Now we're rated triple B. So you can see we don't have a constant credit rating standard. Now, then there's some background noise. Somebody's playing loud music here in Saudi. Okay, whatever. Then I'm going to say, well, here's the AA start. So let's put it, whoops. So if we've got 0 debt to capital, let me put it up here. Let's put it at 4. If we've got 0 debt to capital, we're going to be AAA up until we hit 38. And then we're starting with triple B. Then we go over here to 42. Then we're starting with A. Then we go to 52, and so on and so forth. So this is an index function, of course, and we take this one. And then we take, this comes from the other sheet. Uh-oh, I better press Shift-Control-C. I press Shift-Control-C, it all works. When you press this Shift-Control-C, if you're having problems, I don't think anybody uses this, and I'm sad about it, but it says how many rows to scan and how many columns to scan, so you've got to be a little careful with that. You have to scan enough rows to kind of If you just scan 5 columns, it won't know where to start, you know. You have to scan enough columns to get it started, and if you're looking at columns, you have to know, stuff. Okay. Then we did the same thing. I did the same thing, or we did in the last video, if you want to call it that. We put different, this is just kind of industrial debt to capital ratios. For AAA, we have 12%. So it's less than 12%, we get AAA. And then we can put that in as our debt beta. And then we can go put 28, 26%. I hope you're not hearing this background music too loudly. I don't know why. Oh my gosh. Just when I started making a video, God, should I call that hotel or something? All right, enough. Let me get back on track. Now let's say we input a debt to capital here. And if I input a debt to capital, well, if I use the lookup function, okay, then I say, well, let's take this one and look up against these debt to capitals here. And then we look up in the debt beta. So we put a different debt to capital in, 60%, and then we get, oops, it keeps the same, 67%, then it goes up. Okay. 70%, then it goes up. Now, I am talking loudly because of this stuff. You know, it would be much better to interpolate in between these. So if we're in between these, let's go in between these. If we're in between these, let's go in between this. And that's what this interpolate function does. And since I've been struggling with it, but I think it's so enormously important, I'm going to go to chapter 1. Oops, not chapter 2, chapter 1. Why can't I get up on that? Okay, and then in chapter 1 we go to Excel utilities, and along with kind of the key files that I think you should really download. I'm going to talk about this one a little more later in some other videos. But this lookup and interpolate file has these functions that allow you to do the interpolate. And it says go to F8. We'll press Alt F8. And then after that it says, well, select the functions macro. We'll put edit. And then it says press Control A, Control C. Once you have that, Control C, you go back. Now you can't run a function from a different sheet. That's why I have to do that. And then you go to the developer and you go to macros, and you can just look in this workbook. And I already put it in here, so we put edit, but you make kind of a blank macro and just Control V. And that's how you get it. Now when you get this interpolate function, you put interpolate, and I'm going to get the one that says interpolate linear. That means it doesn't do any compounding of the growth. We do almost precisely the same thing. We look up on the debt to capital ratios, and then we look up on the beta, and it gives us now, if we put 50%, it goes between, and it gives us a lot better than if I put 55%, 60%. It's not a step function anymore. And then if I put interpolate and just regular interpolate lookup, I take this one and select this. Now, I don't know why Excel doesn't have this. This was harder to program, and I have some videos that describe how to program it. And I have some other video on interpolation that everybody watched that's really crappy. Now, I did the same thing here. I put lookup, tab, go up here to the lookup and select this. So if you ever use, it should be illegal unless you, no, it should be illegal to use regular lookup, VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP. I mean, you could have done HLOOKUP, but then you can do the same thing with interpolate lookup and all of that. So it's just a different function. Sorry, I just tapped my leg. Now, here's what I did next. How are we doing on time? Only 9 minutes, not so bad. to explain a few of these ideas. On this sheet, I said, okay, well, I want to compare this whole system of varying the beta compared to not varying the beta. This was inputs. This thing, we didn't really get anything from a different sheet except in this very detailed calculation, and I can explain later, not now, that the shift control C only accepts some functions, so I didn't accept this function, and blah, blah, blah. Now, I made a little true and false with the developer tab, you know, just putting a little thing here. So we said, I said, is the debt constant debt beta, constant BD. I should have done it like this, constant BD. Okay, and then let's format it. So that could be either true or false. If it's true, everything's flat. If it's false, we have some things switching around. By the way, this did come from, so if I wanted to use the, excuse me, if I wanted to, let's make this sheet blue or something. I didn't know it played such rock and roll in Saudi. Now this is blue. Actually, this is blue too. Well, that's pretty bad. I can't explain why it did actually indeed work. That's pretty embarrassing. So now we can put in a different business risk, as I showed before, and we get dramatically, I hope you're looking at this thing. And this thing should be Shift Control 7 if you want to very quickly kind of just circle a line. Okay? So we put true and false, and then I said, well, this, excuse me, this, I'll redo the formula here. That will be the easiest part. If we take a constant beta, F4, then we'll just put this constant beta in. And otherwise, take interpolate lookup, let's use the linear one, and then we go first to the debt to capital, and after we go to the debt to capital, we look up on the debt to capital kind of table, and then we look up on the debt beta table. And then I should have put this as, I should have locked these in too, right? Okay. A lot of times, shoot. And I think I said, well, if it's true, I should have put F4 here, okay? All right, so that's our debt beta. And you know, I didn't really need this. I should say constant debt beta. We didn't really need this, okay? And then we said, all right, well, let's put the non-constant debt beta, and let's just work through. This was our input. And this beta on the unlevered number was assumed to be the same. So the cost of the unlevered equity is just the risk-free rate plus the unlevered beta. And now we can get KD, and that's our unlevered beta multiplied by the equity market risk premium plus the risk-free rate. Gosh, is it loud over there? And then we get an increasing cost of debt. Let me push it down here. So now we got a smooth kind of number. And then the cost of equity, if this is in a no-tax case, I didn't even tell you. My God, it's in a no-tax case. That earlier series of videos just corrected it. It's almost like you should remember, you can take the unlevered cost multiplied by the cost of debt times the debt to capital and divide that by the equity to capital, so we have to put 1 minus the debt to capital. and then we get the numbers. And the reason I had to press Shift Control 7 again is because it didn't do it. Now, if we put a constant debt beta in, we get it going to 38%, whereas the non-constant beta had a much different one. Now we could also get the implied beta, which is we just do the same kind of thing we did with the debt beta, recognizing that the cost of equity multiplied by the risk equity market risk premium is that. And then we can take the computed one, which again takes the unlevered beta, subtracts the debt beta, times the debt to capital, and divides it by 1 minus the equity cost of capital. Okay? And then I'm going to do one, and I'm going to do this fairly quickly. I think I should have taken this out. I'm going to put constant debt beta. Okay, and it's the same sort of thing, but this time we're going to remember that this time we're going to add taxes to the whole thing. So the whole interpolate lookup is the same sort of thing as before, and this time I'm not going to redo this because I just made about exactly 3 videos. And I said, well, this gross amount, that's the amount you observe. That's the debt, market debt to capital. How about this? I'll put some things like that. The market debt to capital. Well, maybe I shouldn't have done that, but whatever. And then the unlevered beta, that stays the same. The cost, that's just from an input, so our other input, it came from the other sheet. If I put 1.1, we get kind of a different number. If we go up to this one and we put 0.8 in, then we get a different kind of distribution. It has an even bigger effect with, I guess, a lower unlevered beta. Okay. Now, sorry. Then we compute the cost of debt the same way. This is the cost of debt by the providers of funds. Cost of debt providers. Not us. And then we have the, how about this? Of funds. Oh, and then I didn't wrap the text, excuse me, okay? And then we put the equity capital, which is just 1 minus the debt capital, and then we have this tax effect, and we get this net, the tax effect, I didn't go through that, that's the debt to capital multiplied by the tax rate. That's how much, you know, why would you know, but that's how much the tax, this value of the debt to us goes down. That's the tax effect to us, not to the providers of funds. And then we can take that, the gross equity to capital, and divide it by 1 minus the tax effect, and we get the equity to capital, which is net. And remember, these net amounts will allow you to compute the cost of equity and the implied beta. And I was struggling with that before I did it right. I had some crap at the end here. So this is now, this calculation of cost of equity uses net amounts and doesn't account for the tax rate. And I proved that that's right. I don't care how many academics squiggle around with their formulas. This is the right way to do it. I'm convinced. And then we go to the implied beta, and we can take the implied beta just as we last did, and then we can prove that we get the same thing. And I think you can even prove here that the cost of debt is right, the cost of equity is right. Believe it or don't. And then the WACC is different. The WACC uses the gross amounts, not the net amounts, and you take 1 minus the tax rate. So the WACC, remember, that changes over time. And now let's try to look at the same sort of things here. Okay, let's put we've got a business risk of 2 in both cases. Okay, and let's make sure this takes the If we look at this one, it takes M22 to R22. So it's M22. So we take the same det betas, okay? And then in the no tax case, and I think the rest of it's the same. Oops, let me put 0.8 here. Okay. So let's put a constant beta in both of those. Now, if we have a constant beta, it goes from 5.2 to 26%. This goes less, 5.2 to 24%. We could think about why that happens, but essentially, the debt, the effect of the debt is less extreme, I guess, because we're cutting the debt by the tax rate. Now, let's put the non-constant beta that allows us to change it. Now it goes from 5.2 down to 2.89, and when we do this, it went from 5.9. It didn't quite go as low. I should have probably graphed this out and everything else. Okay, so that's just some of the technical details. You don't really need all of this, do you? Certainly for this one. Okay, I'm going to take this one out. Shift Control C again. And I'm going to say goodbye for this video. So that's one more. Now, I do have to warn you that I put this up here. I think what we should do now is in our next video, I was going to say goodbye, sorry, I couldn't stop. In our next video, we'll do the same sort of thing where we do the unlevered beta and the re-leveraging of the beta kind of in a realistic case. All right? Enough. Oops, I gotta stop the video. Oh no.